Oops. Fuck. Guess what I forgot? I forgot my fucking Squishmallow. God damn it. I forgot it. Completely forgot it. I forgot. No. I have nothing. Like literally nothing. I have a pack of wipes over there. Virtual emotional support. God damn it. I'm scared. Fuck. Yeah, I literally have nothing. I have nothing. Great. I'm going swimming after this, so that's why I look like shit. Because I really don't have any makeup on. I just did mascara and that was it. And I put my hair up. Ever since I found out how to do my hair like this, it's all I've been able to do. It's so cute. It's a little uneven. It's a little off center, but it gets the job done. I'm living my like Ariana moment. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared. Let's say crisscross applesauce. Okay. We are reading chapters, 57 through 60, I think. This meeting, I think, is stressing me out more than Adian's rescue, because at least I knew that Adian got rescued. Like, I knew that Adian wasn't gonna die. Like, there was no way that they were gonna do this whole rescue mission and kill him. But there is a very strong possibility that they will kill Lysandra, so... through 61. Okay, thank you, Sarah. If they do, I will cry. And it'll be a rough one today. Anyway, alright, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 57. Here we go. I can smell them all right, Adian said, his whisper barely audible as they crept through the underbrush, each of them clothed in green and brown to remain concealed in the dense forest. He and Rowan walked several paces ahead of Aelin, arrows loosely nocked in their bows as they picked out the way with their keen hearing and smell. If she had her damn Fae form, she could be helping instead of lingering behind with Kale and Nesterin, but not a useful thought, she told herself. She would make do with what she had. Kale knew the forest best, having come hunting this way with Dorian countless times. He'd laid out a path for them the night before, but had yielded leading to the two Fae warriors and their impeccable senses. His steps were unfaltering on the leaves and moss beneath their boots, his face drawn but steady, focused. Good. They passed through the trees of Oakwald so silently that the birds didn't stop their chirping. Brannan's forest. Her forest. She wondered if its denizens knew what blood flowed in her veins, and hid their little party from the horrors waiting ahead. She wondered if they'd somehow help Lysandra when it came time. Rowan paused 10 feet ahead and pointed to the 3 towering oaks. She halted, her ears straining as she scanned the forest. Growls and roars of beasts that sounded far too large rumbled toward them, along with the scrape of leathery wings on stone. Bracing herself, she hurried to where Rowan and Adian were waiting by the oak trees, her cousin pointing skyward to indicate their next movement. Aelin took the center tree, hardly disturbing a leaf or twig as she climbed. Rowan waited until she'd reached a high branch before coming up behind her. In about the same amount of time she had done it, she noted a bit smugly. Adian took the tree to the right, with Kale and Nesterin scaling the left. They all kept climbing, as smoothly as snakes, until the foliage blocked their view of the ground below, and they could see into a little meadow up ahead. Holy gods. The wyverns were enormous, vicious, and those were indeed saddles on their backs. Poison barbs on the tail, Rowan mouthed in her ear. With that wingspan, they can probably fly hundreds of miles a day. He would know, she supposed. Only 13 wyverns were grounded in the meadow. The smallest of them was sprawled on his belly, face buried in a mound of wildflowers. Oh, not Abraxas. Iron spikes gleamed on his tail in lieu of bone. Scars covered his body like a cat's stripes. And his wings. She knew the material grafted there. Spider silk. That much of it must have cost a fortune. The other wyverns were all normal, and all capable of ripping a man in half in one bite. They would be dead within moments against one of these things. But an army 3,000 strong? Panic pushed in. I'm Aelin Galathinius. That one. I bet she's the wing leader, Rowan said, pointing now to the women gathered at the edge of the meadow. Not women. Witches. They were all young and beautiful, with hair and skin of every shade and color, but even from the distance she picked out the one Rowan had pointed to. Her hair was like living moonlight, her eyes like burnished gold. She was the most beautiful person Aelin had ever seen, and the most horrifying. She moved with a swagger that Aelin supposed only an immortal could achieve, her red cloak snapping behind her, the riding leathers clinging to her lithe body. A living weapon. That's what the wing leader was. The wing leader prowled through the camp, inspecting the wyverns and giving orders Aelin's human ears couldn't hear. The other 12 witches seemed to track her every movement, as if she were the axis of their world, and 2 of them followed behind her especially closely. Lieutenants. Aelin fought to keep her balance on the wide bow. An army that Terrasen might raise would be annihilated, along with the friends around her. They were all so dead. Rowan put a hand on her waist, as if he could hear the refrain pounding through her with every heartbeat. You took down one of their matrons, he said in her ear, barely more than a rustling leaf. You can take down her inferiors. Maybe not, given the way the 13 witches in the clearing moved and interacted. They were a tight-knit, brutal unit. They did not look like the sort that took prisoners. If they did, they likely ate them. Would they fly Lysandra to Morath once the prison wagon arrived? If so, Lysandra doesn't get within 30 feet of the wyverns. If she got hauled onto one of them, then it would already be too late. Agreed, Rowan murmured, horses approaching from the north. Ah! I'm scared! And more wings from the west. Let's go. The matron, then. The horses would be the king and the prison wagon, and Dorian. Adian looked ready to start ripping out witch throats as they reached the ground and slunk through the forest again, heading for the clearing. Nesrin had an arrow knocked in her bow as she slipped into the brush to provide cover, her face grave, ready for anything. At least that made one of them. Aelin fell into step beside Kale. No matter what you see or hear, do not move. We need to assess Dorian before we act. Just one of those vowed princes is lethal. I know, he said, refusing to meet her stare. You can trust me. I need you to make sure Lysandra gets out. You know this forest better than any of us. Get her somewhere safe. Kale nodded. I promise. She didn't doubt it. Not after this winter. She reached out, paused, and then put a hand on his shoulder. I won't touch Dorian, she said. I swear it. His bronze eyes flickered. Thank you. They kept moving. That's even if he trusted her enough to believe her. Adian and Rowan had them all doubling back to the area they'd scouted earlier, a little outcropping of boulders with enough brush for them to crouch unseen and observe everything that was happening in the clearing. Slowly, like lovely wraiths from a hell realm, the witches appeared. The white-haired witch strode to greet an older, black-haired female who could only be the matron of the Blackbeak clan. Behind the matron, a cluster of witches hauled a large covered wagon, much like the one the Yellowlegs had once parked before the glass palace. The wyverns must have carried it between them. It looked ordinary, painted black and blue and yellow, but Aelin had a feeling that she didn't want to know what was inside. Then the royal party arrived. Now my husband! She didn't know where to look. At the king of Ardalan, at the small, too familiar prison wagon in the center of the riders, or at Dorian, riding at his father's side, the black collar around his neck, and nothing human in his face. Chapter 58. Man in Blackbeak hated this forest. The trees were unnaturally close, so close that they'd had to leave the wyverns behind in order to make their way to the clearing a half-mile from the crumbling temple. At least the humans hadn't been stupid enough to pick the temple itself as a meeting site. It was too precariously perched, the ravine too open to spying eyes. Yesterday, Manon and the 13 had scouted all the clearings within a mile radius, weighing them for their visibility, accessibility, and cover, and finally settled on this one, near enough to where the king had originally demanded they meet, but far... Excuse me, sorry. Near enough to where the king had originally demanded they meet, but a far more protected spot. Rule 1 of dealing with mortals: never let them pick the exact location. First, her grandmother and her escort coven strode through the trees from wherever they'd landed, a covered wagon in tow, no doubt carrying the weapon she'd created. She assessed Manon with a slashing glance and merely said, "Keep silent and out of our way. Speak only when spoken to. Don't cause trouble, or I'll rip out your throat." Later then, she would talk to her grandmother about the vow later. The king was late, and his party made enough goddamn noise as they traipsed through the woods that Manon heard them a good 5 minutes before the king's massive black war horse appeared around the bend in the path. The other riders flowed behind him like a dark shadow. The scent of the Valg slithered along her body. They'd brought a prison wagon with them, containing a prisoner to be transferred to Morath. Female, from the smell of her, and strange. She'd never come across that scent before. Not Valg, not Fae, not entirely human. Interesting. But the 13 were warriors, not courtiers. Couriers? Whatever. Her hands behind her back, Manon waited as her grandmother glided toward the king, monitoring his human Valgan entourage. Sorry, I'm nervous. While they surveyed the clearing. The man closest to the king didn't bother glancing around. His sapphire eyes went right to Manon and stayed there. It would have been beautiful were it not for the dark collar around his throat and the utter coldness in his perfect face. Oh. He smiled at Manon as though he knew the taste of her blood. She stifled the urge to bare her teeth and shifted her focus to the matron, who had now stopped before the mortal king. Such a reek from these people. How was her grandmother not grimacing as she stood before them? "Your Majesty," her grandmother said, her black robes like liquid night as she gave the slightest of bobs. "I'm scared!" Manon shut out the bark of protest in her throat. Never had her grandmother bowed or curtsied or so much as nodded for another ruler, not even the other matrons. Manon shoved the outrage down deep as the king dismounted in one powerful movement. "High Witch," he said, angling his head in not quite a bow but enough to show some kernel of acknowledgement. A massive sword hung at his side. His clothes were dark and rich, and his face, cruelty incarnate. Not the cold, cunning cruelty that Manon had honed and delighted in, but base, brute cruelty, the kind that sent all those men to break into her cottages, thinking her in need of a lesson. This was the man to whom they were to bow, to whom her grandmother had lowered her head a fraction of an inch. Her grandmother gestured behind her with an iron-tipped hand, and Manon lifted her chin. "I present to you my granddaughter, Manon, heir of the Black Beak clan and wing leader of your aerial cavalry." Manon stepped forward, enduring the raking gaze of the king, the dark-haired young man who had ridden at his side dismounted with fluid grace, still smirking at her. She ignored him. "You do your people a great service, wing leader," the king said, his voice like granite. Manon just stared at him, keenly aware of the matron judging her every move. "Aren't you going to say anything?" the king demanded, his thick brows, one scarred, high. "I was told to keep my mouth shut," Manon said. Her grandmother's eyes flashed. "Unless you prefer I get on my knees and grovel." Oh, there would certainly be hell to pay for that remark. Her grandmother turned to the king. "She's an arrogant thing, but you'll find no deadlier warrior." But the king was smiling, though it didn't reach his dark eyes. "I don't think you've ever groveled for anything in your life, wing leader." Manon gave him a half-smile in return, her iron teeth out. Let his young companion wet himself at the sight. "We witches aren't born to grovel before humans." The king chuckled mirthlessly and faced her grandmother, whose iron-tipped fingers had curved as if she were imagining them around Manon's throat. "You choose our wing leader well, matron," he said, and then gestured to the wagon painted with the iron-teeth banner. "Let us see what you've brought for me. I hope it will be equally impressive and worth the wait." Her grandmother grinned, revealing iron teeth that had begun to rust in some spots, and eyes licked up Manon's spine. "This way." Shoulders back, head high, Manon waited at the bottom of the wagon steps to follow the matron and the king inside, but the man, so much taller and wider than she up close, frowned at the sight of her. My son can entertain the wing leader. And that was it. She was shut out as he and her grandmother vanished within. Apparently, she wasn't to see this weapon, at least not as one of the first, wing leader or not. Manon took a breath and checked her temper. Half of the 13 encircled the wagon for the matron's safety, while the others dispersed to monitor the royal party around them. Knowing their place, their inadequacy in the face of the 13, the escort coven faded back into the tree line. Black, uniformed guards watched them all, some armed with spears, some with crossbows, some with vicious swords. The prince was now leaning against a gnarled oak. Noticing her attention, he gave her a lazy grin. It was enough. King's son or not, she didn't give a damn. Manon crossed the clearing, Sorel behind her, on edge but keeping her distance. There was no one in earshot as Manon stopped a few feet away from the crown prince. "Hello, princeling," she purred. Oh. Are they going to end up together? The world kept slipping out from underneath Cale's feet, so much so that he grabbed a handful of dirt just to remember where he was and that this was real, not some nightmare. Dorian, his friend, unharmed, but not Dorian, not even close to Dorian, as the prince smirked at that beautiful white-haired witch. The face was the same, but the soul gazing out of those sapphire eyes had not been created in this world. Cale squeezed the dirt harder. He had run from Dorian and let this happen. It hadn't been hope that he carried when he fled, but stupidity. Aelin had been right. It would be a mercy to kill him. With the king and matron occupied, Cale glanced toward the wagon and then at Aelin, lying on her stomach in the brush, a dagger out. She gave him a quick nod, her mouth a tight line. Now, if they were going to make their move to free Lysandra, it would have to be now. Does it have to be right now? I don't think it has to. I don't think so. And for Nehemiah, for the friend vanished beneath the wordstone collar, he would not falter. I'm gonna have a fucking panic attack. I'm fucking sweating. I'm sweating and I'm shaking. My hands are clammy. My stomach is in knots. I'm so scared. This is not fun. The ancient, cruel demon squatting inside him began thrashing as the white-haired witch sauntered up to him. It had been content to sneer from afar. One of us, one of ours. It hissed to him. We made it, so we'll take it. Every step closer made her unbound hair shimmer like moonlight on water, but the demon began scrambling away as the sun lit up her eyes. Not too close, it said. Do not let the witchling too close. The eyes of the vowed kings. Hello, princeling, she said, her voice bedroom soft and full of glorious death. Hello, witchling, he said, and the words were his own. For a moment he was so stunned that he blinked. He blinked. The demon inside him recoiled, clawing at the walls of his mind. Eyes of the vowed kings, eyes of our master, it shrieked. Do not touch that one. Is there a reason you're smiling at me, she said, or shall I interpret it as a death wish? Do not speak to it. He didn't care. Let this be another dream, another nightmare. Let this new, lovely monster devour him whole. He had nothing beyond the here and now. Do I need a reason to smile at a beautiful woman? That's Dorian. That's my man. That's my man. That's him. That's him, all right. I'm not a woman. Her iron nails glinted as she crossed her arms. And you, she sniffed. Man or demon? Prince, he said. That's what the thing inside him was. He had never learned its name. Do not speak to it. He cocked his head. I've never been with a witch. In front of me? In front of my eyes? He would disrespect me like this? Let her rip out his throat for that. End it. A row of iron fangs snapped down over her teeth as her smile grew. I've been with plenty of men. You're all the same. Taste the same. She looked him over as if he were her next meal. I dare you, he managed to say. Her eyes narrowed, the gold like living embers. He'd never seen anyone so beautiful. This witch had been crafted from the darkness between the stars. I think not, Prince, she said in her midnight voice. She sniffed again, her nose crinkling slightly. But would you bleed red or black? I'll bleed whatever color you tell me to. Step away. Get away. The demon prince inside him yanked so hard he took a step, but not away, toward the white-haired witch. She let out a low, vicious laugh. What's your name, Prince? His name. He didn't know what that was. She reached out, her iron nails glimmering in the dappled sunlight. The demon's screaming was so loud in his head that he wondered if his ears would bleed. Iron clinked against stone as she grazed the collar around his neck. Higher, if she just slashed higher. Like a dog, she murmured, leash to your master. She ran a finger along the curve of the collar, and he shuddered, in fear, in pleasure, in anticipation of the nails tearing into his throat. What is your name? A command, not a question, as eyes of pure gold met his. Dorian, he breathed. Stop! 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 Your name is nothing. Your name is mine, the demon hissed, and a wave of that human woman's screaming swept him away. Crouched in the brush just 20 feet from the prison wagon, Aelin froze. Dorian. It couldn't have been. There wasn't a chance of it, not when the voice that Dorian had spoken with was so empty, so hollow, but beside her, Kale's eyes were wide. Had he heard the slight shift? The wing leader cocked her head, her iron-tipped hand still touching the wordstone collar. Do you want me to kill you, Dorian? Aelin's blood went cold. Kale tensed, his hand going to his sword. Aelin gripped the back of his tunic in silent reminder. She had no doubt that across the clearing, Nesrin's arrow was already pointed with lethal accuracy at the wing leader's throat. I want you to do lots of things to me. Shut up, the prince said, raking his eyes along the witch's body. The humanity was gone again. She'd imagined it. The way the king had acted. That was a man who held pure control over his son, confident that there was no struggle inside. A soft, joyless laugh, and then the wing leader released Dorian's collar. Her red cloak flowed around her on a phantom wind as she stepped back. Come find me again, Prince, and we'll see about that. A Valg prince inhabited Dorian, but Aelin's nose did not bleed in its presence. And there was no creeping fog of darkness. Had the king muted its power so his son could deceive the world around him? Or was that battle still being waged inside the prince's mind? No, they had to move now, while the matron and the king remained in that painted wagon. Rowan cupped his hands to his mouth and signaled with the bird's call, so lifelike that none of the guards shifted, but across the clearing Aedion and Nesrin heard and understood. She didn't know how they managed to accomplish it, but a minute later the wyverns of the High Witch's Coven were roaring with alarm, the trees shuddering with the sound. Every guard and sentinel turned toward the racket, away from the prison wagon. It was all the distraction Aelin needed. She'd spent 2 weeks in one of those wagons. She knew the bars of the little window, knew the hinges and the locks, and Rowan, fortunately, knew exactly how to dispatch the 3 guards stationed at the back door without making a sound. She didn't dare breathe too loudly as she climbed the few steps to the back of the wagon, pulled out her lock-picking kit, and set to work. One look over here, one shift on the wind. There, the lock sprang open, and she eased back the door, bracing for squeaky hinges. By some god's mercy, it made no sound, and the wyverns went on bellowing. Lysandra was curled against the far corner, bloody and dirty, her short nightgown torn and her bare legs bruised. No collar, no ring on either hand. Aelin bit back her cry of relief and flicked her fingers to tell the courtesan to hurry. On near silent feet, Lysandra hurtled past her, right into the speckled brown and green cloak Rowan was holding out. 2 heartbeats later, she was down the steps and into the brush. Another beat, and the dead guards were inside the wagon with the door locked. Aelin and Rowan slipped back into the forest amid the roars of the wyverns. Lysandra was shivering where she knelt in the thicket, Kale before her, inspecting her wounds. My hands are so sweaty! He mouthed to Aelin that she was fine, and helped the courtesan rise to her feet before hauling her deeper into the woods. It had taken less than 2 minutes, and thank the gods, because a moment later the painted wagon's door was flung open, and the matron and king stormed out to see what the noise was about. A few paces from Aelin, Rowan monitored every step, every breath their enemy took. There was a flash of movement beside her, and then Aedion and Nesrin were there, dirty and panting but alive. The grin on Aedion's face faltered as he peered back at the clearing behind them. The king stalked to the heart of the clearing, demanding answers. Butchering bastard. And for a moment, they were again in Terrasen, at that dinner table in her family's castle, where the king had eaten her family's food, drunk their finest wine, and then he tried to shatter her mind. Aedion's eyes met hers, his body trembling with restraint, waiting for her order. She knew she might live to regret it, but Aelin shook her head. Not here. Not now. There were too many variables and too many players on the board. They had Lysandra. It was time to go. The king told his son to get onto his horse and barked orders to the others as the wing leader backed away from the prince with a casual, lethal grace. The matron waded across the clearing, her voluminous black robes billowing despite her stillness. Aelin prayed that she and her companions would never run into the matron, at least not without an army behind them. Whatever the king had seen inside the painted wagon had been important enough that they hadn't risked letters about its specific details. Dorian mounted his horse, his face cold and empty. "I'll come back for you," she promised him. She had not thought it would be in this way. The king's party departed with eerie silence and efficiency, seemingly unaware that they were now missing 3 of their own. The stench of the Valg faded as they vanished, cleared away by a brisk wind as if Oakwald itself wanted to wipe away any trace. Headed in the opposite direction, the witches prowled into the trees, lugging the wagon behind them with inhuman strength, until only the wing leader and her horrifying grandmother remained in the clearing. The blow happened so fast that Aelin couldn't detect it. Even Adian flinched. The smack reverberated through the forest, and the wing leader's face snapped to the side to reveal 4 lines of blue blood now running down her cheek. "Insolent fool," the matron hissed, lingering near the trees, and the beautiful golden-haired lieutenant observed every movement the matron made, so intensely that Aelin wondered if she would go for the matron's throat. "Do you wish to cost me everything?" "Grandmother, I sent you letters. I received your whining, sniveling letters, and I burned them. You are under orders to obey. Did you think my silence was not intentional? Do as the Duke says. How can you allow these?" Another strike. 4 more lines, bleeding down the witch's face. "You dare question me? Do you think yourself as good as a high witch, now that you're a wing leader?" "No, matron." There was no sign of that cocky, taunting tone of minutes before, only cool, lethal rage. A killer by birth and training, but the golden eyes turned toward the painted wagon, a silent question. The matron leaned in, her rusted iron teeth within shredding distance of her granddaughter. "Ask it, Manon. Ask what's inside the wagon." The golden-haired witch by the trees was ramrod straight. Beginning to pray, beginning to beg for forgiveness for what he was about to do and for how he had run. He'd kill the king later, let that kill be his last, but this would be the kill that broke him. He drew his dagger, cocking his arm. Dorian had been directly behind the king. One throw, to knock the prince off the horse, then a sweep of his sword and it could be over. Aelin and the others could deal with the aftermath. He'd already be dead. Cale broke through the trees into a field, the dagger a burning weight in his hand. It was not the king's party that stood there in the tall grass and sunlight. Oh, shit. Oh, this is not good. Oh, out of all the bad situations, I mean, he might as well just be face to face with the king himself at this point, because it's not good. It's not a good situation. 13 witches and their wyverns turned to him and smiled. Yeah. Aelin ran through the trees as Rowan tracked Cale by scent alone. If he got them killed, if he got them hurt, they'd left Nesrin to guard Lysandra, ordering them to head for the forest across the nearby temple ravine and to wait under an outcropping of stones. Before herding Lysandra between the trees, Nesrin had tightly grabbed Aelin's arm and said, "Bring him back." Aelin had only nodded before bolting. Rowan was a streak of lightning through the trees, so much faster than her when she was stuck in this body. Adian sprinted close behind him. She ran as quickly as she could, but the path veered away and Cale had taken the wrong fork. Where the hell had Cale even been going? She could scarcely draw breath fast enough. Then light flooded in through a break of the trees, the other side of the wide meadow. Rowan and Adian stood a few feet into the swaying grass, their swords out, but downcast. She saw why, a heartbeat later. Not 30 feet from them, Cale's lip bled down his chin as the white-haired witch held him against her, her iron nails digging into his throat. The prison wagon was open beyond them to reveal the 3 dead soldiers inside. The 12 witches behind the wing leader were all grinning with anticipatory delight as they took in Rowan and Adian, then her. "What's this?" the wing leader said, a killing light in her golden eyes. "Spies? Rescuers? Where did you take our prisoner?" Cale struggled, and she dug her nails in farther. He stiffened. A trickle of blood leaked down his neck and onto his tunic. "Oh, gods. Think. The wing leader shifted those burnt gold eyes to Rowan. "Your kind," the wing leader mused. "I have not seen for a time." "Let the man go," Rowan said. Manon's smile revealed a row of fresh, shredding iron teeth, far, far too close to Cale's neck. "I don't take orders from fey bastards." "Let him go," Rowan said too softly, "or it will be the last mistake you make, wing leader." In the field behind them, the wyverns were stirring, their tails lashing, wings shifting. The white-haired witch peered at Cale, whose breathing had turned ragged. "The king is not too far down the road. Perhaps I should hand you over to him." The cuts on her cheeks, scabbed and blue, were like brutal war paint. "He'll be furious to learn you stole his prisoner from me. Maybe you'll appease him, boy." Aelin and Rowan shared all of one look before she stepped up to his side, drawing Goldrin. "If you want a prize to give the king," Aelin said, "then take me." "Don't," Cale gasped out. The witch and all 12 of her sentinels now fixed their immortal deadly attention on Aelin. Aelin dropped Goldrin into the grass and lifted her hands. Adian snarled in warning. "Why should I bother?" the wing leader said. "Perhaps we'll take you all to the king." Adian's sword lifted slightly. "You can try." Aelin carefully approached the witch, her hands still up. "You enter into a fight with us, and you and your companions will die." The wing leader looked her up and down. "Who are you?" An order, not a question. "Aelin Galithinius." Surprise, and perhaps something else, something Aelin couldn't identify, sparked in the wing leader's golden eyes. "The Queen of Terrasen." Aelin bowed, not daring to take her attention off the witch. "At your service." Only 3 feet separated her from the Blackbeak heir. The witch sliced a glance at Cale, and then at Adian and Rowan. "Your court? What's it to you?" The wing leader studied Adian again. "Your brother?" "My cousin, Adian. Almost as pretty as me, wouldn't you say?" The witch didn't smile, but Aelin was now near enough, so close that the splatters of Cale's blood lay in the grass before the tips of her boots. The Queen of Terrasen. Elid's hope had not been misplaced, even if the young queen was now towing the dirt and grass, unable to keep still while she bargained for the man's life. Behind her, the Fey warrior observed every flicker of movement. He'd be the deadly one, the one to look out for. It had been 50 years since she'd fought a Fey warrior, bedded him, then fought him. He'd left the bones of her arms in pieces. She'd just left him in pieces. but he had been young and arrogant and barely trained. This male, he might very well be capable of killing at least a few of her 13 if she so much as harmed a hair on the queen's head. And then there was the golden-haired one, as large as the Fey male, but possessing his cousin's bright arrogance and honed wildness. He might be problematic if left alive too long. The queen kept fidgeting her foot in the grass. She couldn't be more than 20, and yet she moved like a warrior too. Or she had, until the incessant shifting around. But she halted the movement, as if realizing that it gave away her nerves, her inexperience. The wind was blowing in the wrong direction for Manon to detect the queen's true level of fear. Well, wing leader? Would the king put a collar around her fair neck, as he had the prince's, or would he kill her? It made no difference. She would be a prize the king would welcome. Manon shoved away the captain, sending him stumbling toward the queen. Aelin reached out with an arm, nudging him to the side, behind her. Manon and the queen stared at each other. No fear in her eyes, in her pretty, mortal face. None. It'd be more trouble than it was worth. Manon had bigger things to consider anyway. Her grandmother approved of the breeding, the breaking of the witches. Manon needed to get into the needed to lose herself in cloud and wind for a few hours, days, weeks. I have no interest in prisoners or battling today, Manon said. The Queen of Terrasen gave her a grin. Good. Manon turned away, barking at her 13 to get into their mounts. I suppose, the Queen went on, that makes you smarter than Baba Yellowlegs. Why would she say that? Why would she say that? I have never thought this bitch stupid until right now. Until, right now. Why would she say that? Why would she say that? Astron World, what do you know of Baba Yellowlegs? The Queen gave a low chuckle, despite the warning growl from the Fey warrior. Slowly, Manon looked over her shoulder. The Queen tugged apart the lapels of her tunic, revealing a necklace of thin scars as the wind shifted. The scent, iron and stone and pure hatred, hit Manon like a rock to the face. Every iron-teeth witch knew the scent that forever lingered on those scars. Witch killer. Perhaps Manon would lose herself in blood and gore instead. Your carry-on, Manon said, and lunged, only to slam face first into an invisible wall, and then freeze entirely. Huh? Run, Aelin breathed, snatching up Goldrun and bolting for the trees. The wing leader was frozen in place, her sentinels wide-eyed as they rushed to her. Kael's human blood wouldn't hold the spell for long. Oh, she was drawing word marks. Okay. The ravine, Adian said, not looking back from where he sprinted ahead with Kael toward the temple. They hurtled through the trees, the witches still in the meadow, still trying to break the spell that had trapped their wing leader. You, Rowan said as he ran beside her, are one very lucky woman. Tell me that again when we're out of here, she panted, leaping over a fallen tree. A roar of fury set the birds scattering from the trees, and Aelin ran faster. Oh, the wing leader was pissed. Really, really pissed. Aelin hadn't believed for one moment that the witch would have let them walk away without a fight. She had needed to buy whatever time they could get. The trees cleared, revealing a barren stretch of land jutting toward the deep ravine, and the temple perched on the spit of rock in the center. On the other side, Oakwald sprawled onward. Connected only by 2 chain and wood bridges, it was the sole way across the ravine for miles, and with the dense foliage of Oakwald blocking the wyverns, it was the only way to escape the witches, who would no doubt pursue on foot. Hurry, Rowan shouted, as they made for the crumbling temple ruins. The temple was small enough that not even the priestesses had dwelled here. The only decorations on the stone island were 5 weather-stained pillars and a crumbling domed roof. Not even an altar, or at least one that had survived the centuries. Apparently, people had given up on Themis long before the king of Ardalan came along. She just prayed that the bridges on either side. Adian hurled himself to a stop before the first footbridge, Kael 30 paces behind, Aelin and Rowan following. Secure, Adian said. Before she could bark a warning, he thundered across. The bridge bounced and swayed, but held. Held even as her damn heart stopped. Then Adian was at the temple island, the single, thin pillar of rock carved out by the rushing river flowing far, far below. Someone's going to die. He waved Kale on. One at a time, he ordered. Beyond him, the second bridge awaited. Kale hurried through the stone pillars that flanked the entrance to the first bridge. The thin iron chains on the sides, writhing as the bridge bounced. He kept upright, flying toward the temple, faster than she'd ever seen him run during all those morning exercises through the castle grounds. Then Aelin and Rowan were at the columns, and don't even try to argue, Rowan hissed, shoving her ahead of him. Gods above, that was a wicked drop beneath them. The roar of the river was barely a whisper. But she ran because Rowan was waiting, and there were the witches breaking through the trees with fey swiftness. The bridge bucked and swayed as she shot over the aging wooden planks. Ahead, Adian had cleared the second bridge to the other side, and Kale was now sprinting across it. Faster. She had to go faster. She leapt the final few feet onto the temple rock. Ahead, Kale exited the second bridge and drew his blade as he joined Adian on the grassy cliff beyond. An arrow knocked in her cousin's bow, aimed at the trees behind her. Aelin lunged up the few stairs onto the bald temple platform. The entire circular space was barely more than 30 feet across, bordered on all sides by a sheer plunge and death. Themis, apparently, was not the forgiving sort. She twisted to look behind. Rowan was running across the bridge, so fast that the bridge hardly moved, but Aelin swore. The wing leader had reached the posts, flinging herself over and jumping through the air to land a third of the way down the bridge. Even Adian's warning shot went long, the arrow embedding where any mortal should have landed, but not a witch. Holy burning hell. Go, Rowan roared at Aelin, but she palmed her fighting knives, bending her knees as an arrow fired by the golden-haired lieutenant shot from Aelin from the other side of the ravine. Aelin twisted to avoid it, only to find a second arrow from the witch already there, anticipating her maneuver. A wall of muscle slammed into her, shielding her and shoving her to the stones, and the witch's arrow went clean through Rowan's shoulder. God damn it! Chapter 60. For a moment the world stopped. Rowan slammed onto the temple stones, his blood spraying on the aged rock. Aelin's scream echoed down the ravine, but then he was up again. That's not enough to keep my boy down, running and bellowing at her to go. Beneath the dark arrow protruding through his shoulder, blood already soaked his tunic, his skin. If he had not been 1 inch farther behind, it would have hit his heart. Not 40 paces down the bridge, the wing leader closed in on them. Adian rained arrows on her sentinels with preternatural precision, keeping them at bay by the tree line. Aelin wrapped an arm around Rowan, and they raced across the temple stones, his face paling as the wound gushed blood. She might have still been screaming or sobbing. There was such a roaring silence in her. Her heart. It had been meant for her heart, and he had taken that arrow for her. The killing calm spread through her like hoarfrost. She'd kill them all, slowly. No, don't kill them! I want y'all to be besties! They reached the second bridge just as Adian's barrage of arrows halted, the quiver no doubt emptied. She shoved Rowan onto the planks. Run, she said. No, run! It was a voice that she'd never heard herself use, a queen's voice that came out, along with the blind yank she made on the blood oath that bound them together. His eyes flashed with fury, but his body moved as though she'd compelled him. He staggered across the bridge, just as Aelin whirled, drawing Goldrin and ducking just as the wing leader's sword swiped for her head. It hit stone, the pillar groaning, but Aelin was already moving, not toward the second bridge, but back toward the first one, on the witch's side. Huh? Where the other witches, without Adian's arrows to block them, were now racing from the cover of the woods. You, the wing leader growled, attacking again. Aelin rolled, right through Rowan's blood, again dodging the fatal blow. She uncurled to her feet right in front of the first bridge, and 2 swings of Goldrin had the chains snapping. The witches skidded to a stop at the lip of the ravine as the bridge collapsed, cutting them off. The air behind her shifted, and Aelin moved, but not fast enough. Cloth and flesh tore in her upper arm, and she barked out a cry as the witch's blade sliced her. She whirled, bringing Goldrin up for the second blow. Steel met steel and sparked. Rowan's blood was at her feet, smeared across the temple stones. Aelin Galathinius looked at Man and Blackbeak over their crossed swords and let out a low, vicious snarl. Queen, savior, enemy, Manon didn't give a shit. She was going to kill the woman. Their laws demanded it. Honor demanded it. Even if she hadn't slaughtered Baba Yellowlegs, Manon would have killed her just for that spell she'd used to freeze her in place. That was what she'd been doing with her feet, etching some foul spell with the man's blood. And now she was going to die. Windcleaver pressed against the queen's blade, but Aelin held her ground and hissed, "I'm going to rip you to shreds." Behind them, the 13 gathered on the ravine's edge, cut off. One whistle from Manon had half of them scrambling for the wyverns. She didn't get to sound the second whistle. Faster than a human had a right to be, the queen swept out a leg, sending Manon tripping back. Aelin didn't hesitate. She flipped the sword in her hand and lunged. Manon deflected the blow, but Aelin got past her guard and pinned her, slamming her head against the stones that were damp with the Fey warrior's blood. Splotches of dark bloomed in her vision. Manon drew in breath for the second whistle, the one to call off Astrid and her arrows. She was interrupted by the queen slamming her fist into Manon's face. Black splintered further across her vision, but she twisted with every bit of her immortal strength, and they went flipping across the temple floor. The drop loomed, and then an arrow whizzed right for the queen's exposed back as she landed atop Manon. Manon twisted again, and the arrow bounced off the pillar instead. She threw Aelin from her, but the queen was instantly on her feet again, nimble as a cat. "She's mine," Manon barked across the ravine to Astrid. The queen laughed, hoarse and cold, circling as Manon got to her feet. Across the other side of the ravine, the two males were helping the wounded Fey warrior off the bridge, and the golden-haired warrior charged. "Don't you dare, Aedion," Aelin said, throwing out a hand in the male's direction. He froze halfway across the bridge. Impressive, Manon admitted, to have them under her command so thoroughly. "Kale, keep an eye on him," the queen barked. Then, holding Manon's gaze, Aelin sheathed her mighty blade across her back, the giant ruby in the pommel catching in the midday light. "Swords are boring," the queen said, and palmed 2 fighting knives. Manon sheathed Windcleaver along her own back. She flicked her wrists, the iron nails shooting out. She cracked her jaw, and her fangs descended. Indeed. The queen looked at the nails, the teeth, and grinned. Honestly, it was a shame that Manon had to kill her. You don't have to. You really don't have to. They could be best friends. They could literally be best friends. Can you imagine those two together? The world is not ready. Manon Blackbeak lunged, as swift and deadly as an adder. Aelin darted back, dodging each swipe of those lethal iron nails, for her throat, for her face, for her guts, back and back, circling around the pillars. It was only a matter of minutes before the wyverns arrived. Aelin jabbed with her daggers, and the witch sidestepped her, only to slash with her nails, right at Aelin's neck. Aelin spun aside, but the nails grazed her skin. Blood warmed her neck and shoulders. The witch was so damn fast, and one hell of a fighter. But Rowan and the others were across the second bridge. Now she just had to get there too. Manon Blackbeak feigned left and slashed right. Aelin ducked and rolled aside. The pillar shuddered as those iron claws gouged 4 lines deep into the stone. Manon hissed. Aelin made to drive her dagger into her spine. The witch lashed out with the hand and wrapped it clean around the blade. Blue blood welled, but the witch bore down on the blade until it snapped into 3 pieces in her hand. God's above. Damn! Aelin had the sense to go in low with her other dagger, but the witch was already there, and Aedion's shout rang in her ears as Manon's knee drove up into her gut. The air knocked out from her in a whoosh, but Aelin kept her grip on the dagger, even as the witch threw her into another pillar. The stone column rocked against the blow, and Aelin's head cracked agony. Arcing through her, but a slash, directly for her face. Aelin ducked. Again, the stone shuddered beneath the impact. Aelin squeezed air into her body. Move. She had to keep moving. Smooth as a stream, smooth as the wind of her Caranam, bleeding and hurt across the way. Pillar to pillar, she retreated, rolling and ducking and dodging. Manon swiped and slashed, slamming into every column, a force of nature in her own right. And then back around, again and again, pillar after pillar, absorbing the blows that should have shredded her face, her neck. Aelin slowed her steps, let Manon think she was tiring, growing clumsy. "Enough, coward," Manon hissed, making to tackle Aelin to the ground, but Aelin swung around a pillar and onto the thin lip of bare rock beyond the temple platform, the drop looming, just as Manon collided with the column. The pillar groaned, swayed, and toppled to the side, hitting the pillar beside it, sending them both cracking to the ground, along with the dome roof. Manon didn't even have time to lunge out of the way as the marble crashed down on her. One of the few remaining witches on the other side of the ravine screamed. But Aelin was already running, even as the rock island itself began trembling, as if whatever ancient force held this temple together had died the moment the roof crumbled. Shit. Aelin sprinted for the second bridge, dust and debris burning her eyes and lungs. The island jolted with a thunderous crack, so violent that Aelin stumbled, but there were the posts and the bridge beyond, Aedion waiting on the other side, an arm held out, beckoning. The island swayed, wider and longer this time. It was going to collapse beneath them. There was a flicker of blue and white, a flash of red cloth, a glimmer of iron, a hand and a shoulder grappling with the fallen column. Slowly, painfully, Manon heaved herself onto a slab of marble, her face coated in a pale dust, blue blood leaking down her temple. Across the ravine, cut off entirely, the golden-haired witch was on her knees. Manon, I don't think you've ever groveled for anything in your life, winged leader, the king had said. But there was a Blackbeak witch on her knees, begging whatever gods they worshipped, and there was Manon Blackbeak, struggling to rise as the temple island crumbled away. Aelin took a step onto the bridge. Astrin, that was the golden-haired witch's name. She screamed for Manon again, a plea to rise, to survive. The island jolted. The remaining bridge, the bridge to her friends, to Rowan, to safety, still held. She's going to go back for her. They're going to fall. They're going to get stranded together, depend on each other to survive, and then become best friends. It's the perfect fantasy. Aelin had felt it before, a thread in the world, a current running between her and someone else. She'd felt it one night, years ago, and had given a young healer the money to get the hell out of this continent. She'd felt the tug, and had decided to tug back. Here it was again, that tug, toward Manon, whose arms buckled as she collapsed to the stone. Her enemy, her new enemy, who would have killed her and Rowan if given the chance. A monster incarnate. But perhaps the monsters needed to look out for each other every now and then. Run! Aedion roared from across the ravine. So she did. Aelin ran for Manon, leaping over the fallen stones, her ankle retching on loose debris. The island rocked with her every step, and the sunlight was scalding, as if Mala were holding that island aloft with every last bit of strength the goddess could summon in this land. Then Aelin was upon Manon Blackbeak, and the witch lifted hate-filled eyes to her. Aelin hauled off stone after stone from her body, the island beneath them buckling. "You're too good a fighter to kill," Aelin breathed, hugging an arm under Manon's shoulder and hauling her up. The rock swayed to the left, but held. Oh, gods. "If I die because of you, I'll beat the shit out of you in hell." She could have sworn the witch let out a broken laugh as she got to her feet, nearly a dead weight in Aelin's arms. You should let me die," Manon rasped as they limped over the rubble. I know, Aelin panted, her sliced arm aching with the weight of the witch it supported. They hurried over the second bridge, the temple rock swaying to the right, stretching the bridge behind them tightly over the drop of the shining river, far, far below. Aelin tugged at the witch, gritting her teeth, and Manon stumbled into a staggering run. Aedion remained between the posts, across the ravine, an arm still extended toward her, while his other hand lifted his sword high, ready for the wing leader's arrival. The rock behind them groaned. Halfway, nothing but a death plunge waiting for them. Manon coughed blue blood onto the wooden slats. Aelin snapped, "What the hell good are your beasts if they can't save you from this kind of thing?" The island veered back in the other direction, and the bridge went taut. Oh, shit. Shit. It was going to snap. Faster they ran, until she could see Aedion's straining fingers in the whites of his eyes. The rock cracked, so loudly it deafened her. Then came the tug and stretch of the bridge as the island began to crumble into dust, sliding to the side. Aelin lunged the last few steps, gripping Manon's red cloak as the chains of the bridge snapped. The wooden slats dropped out from beneath them, and they were already leaping. Aelin let out a grunt as she slammed into Aedion. She whirled to see Kale grabbing Manon and hauling her over the lip of the ravine, her cloak torn and covered in dust, fluttering in the wind. When Aelin looked past the witch, the temple was gone. Damn. Oh, God. Manon gasped for air, concentrating on her breathing, on the cloudless sky above her. The humans left her lying between the stone bridge posts. The queen hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. She just dashed for the injured Fey warrior, his name like a prayer on her lips. Rowan. Manon had looked up in time to see the queen fall to her knees before the injured warrior in the grass, demanding answers from the brown-haired man, Kale, who pressed a hand to the arrow wound in Rowan's shoulder to stanch the bleeding. The queen's shoulders were shaking. "Fireheart," the Fey warrior murmured. Manon would have watched. Would have, had she not coughed blood onto the bright grass and blacked out. When she awoke, they were gone. Only minutes had passed, because then there were booming wings and Abraxas's roar, and there was Astrid and Sorel rushing for her before their wyverns had fully landed. The Queen of Terrasin had saved her life. Manon didn't know what to make of it, for she now owed her enemy a life debt, and she had just learned how thoroughly her grandmother and the King of Ardalan intended to destroy them. Damn. 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 Chapter 61. Well, that went a lot differently than I was thinking it was going to go in my mind. I thought they were going to run into issues freeing Lysandra, but turns out they just ran into the fucking witches. I don't know. That was too stressful for me. Chapter 61. The trek back through Oakwald was the longest journey of Aylin's miserable life. Nesrin had removed the arrow from Rowan's shoulder, and Adian had found some herbs to chew and shove into the open wound to stanch the bleeding. But Rowan still sagged against Kale and Adian as they hurried through the forest. Nowhere to go. She had nowhere to take an injured Fey male in the capital city, in this entire shithole kingdom. Lysandra was pale and shaking. But she squared her shoulders and offered to help carry Rowan when one of them tired. None of them accepted. When Kale at last asked Nestrin to take over, Aylin glimpsed the blood soaking his tunic and hands. Rowan's blood, and nearly vomited. Slower. Every step was slower as Rowan's strength flagged. He needs to rest, Lysandra said gently. Aylin paused, the towering oaks pressing in around her. Rowan's eyes were half closed, his face drained of all color. He couldn't even lift his head. She should have let the witch die. No, she shouldn't have. We can't just camp out in the middle of the woods, Aylin said. He needs a healer. I know where we can take him, Kale said. She dragged her eyes to the captain. She should have let the witch kill him too. Kale wisely averted his gaze and faced Nestrin. Your father's country house. The man who runs it is married to a midwife. Nestrin's mouth tightened. She's not a healer, but yes, she might have something. Do you understand? Aylin said very quietly to them, that if I suspect they're going to betray us, they will die. It was true, and maybe it made her a monster to Kale, but she didn't care. I know, Kale said. Nestrin merely nodded, still calm, still solid. Then lead the way, Aylin said, her voice hollow, and pray they can keep their mouths shut. Oh, God. Joyous, frenzied barking greeted them. Barking? The country? Oh, it's Fleetfoot! Ah! Rousing Rowan from the half-consciousness he'd fallen into during the last few miles to the little stone farmhouse. Aylin had barely breathed the entire time. But despite herself, despite Rowan's injuries, ah! As Fleetfoot raced across the high grass toward them, Aylin smiled a little. The dog leapt upon her, licking and whining and wagging her feathery golden tail. She hadn't realized how filthy and bloody her hands were until she put them on Fleetfoot's shining coat. Adian grunted as he took all of Rowan's weight, while Kale and Nestrin jogged for the large, brightly lit stone house, dust having fallen fully around them. Good. Fewer eyes to see as they exited Oakwald and crossed the freshly tilled fields. Lysandra tried to help Adian, but he refused her again. She hissed at him and helped anyway. Fleetfoot danced around Aylin. Then noticed Adian, Lysandra, and Rowan, and that tale became a bit more tentative. Friends, she told her dog. She'd become huge since Aylin had last seen her. She wasn't sure why it surprised her when everything else in her life had changed as well. Aylin's assurance seemed good enough for Fleetfoot, who trotted ahead, escorting them to the wooden door that had opened to reveal a tall midwife with a no-nonsense face that took one look at Rowan and tightened. One word. One damn word that suggested she might turn them in and she was dead. But the woman said, Whoever put that blood moss on the wound saved his life. Get him inside. We need to clean it before anything else can be done. It took a few hours for Marta, the housekeeper's wife, to clean, disinfect, and patch up Rowan's wounds. Lucky, she kept saying. So lucky it didn't hit anything vital. Cale didn't know what to do with himself other than carry away the bowls of bloodied water. Aylin just sat on a stool beside the cot in the spare room of the elegant, comfortable house, and monitored every move Marta made. Cale wondered if Aylin knew that she was a bloodied mess, that she looked even worse than Rowan. Her neck was brutalized, blood had dried on her face, her cheek was bruised, and the left sleeve of her tunic was torn open to reveal a vicious slice. And then there was the dust, dirt, and blue blood of the wing leader coating her. But Aylin perched on the stool, never moving, only drinking water, snarling if Marta so much as looked at Rowan funny. Marta somehow endured it. And when the midwife was done, she faced the queen. With no clue at all as to who sat in her house, Marta said, "You have two choices. You can either go wash up in the spigot outside, or you can sit with the pigs all night. You're dirty enough that one touch could infect his wounds." Aylin glanced over her shoulder at Adian, who was leaning against the wall behind her. He nodded, silently. He'd look after him. Aylin rose and stalked out. "I'll inspect your other friend now," Marta said, and hurried to where Lysandra had fallen asleep in the adjoining room, curled up on a narrow bed cot. Upstairs, Nesrin was busy dealing with the staff, ensuring their silence, but he'd seen the tentative joy on their faces when they'd arrived. Nesrin and the Falik family had earned their loyalty long ago. Cale gave Aylin 2 minutes and then followed her outside. The stars were bright overhead, the full moon nearly blinding. The night winds whispered through the grass, barely audible over the clunk of sputter of the spigot. She found the queen crouched before it, her face in the stream of water. "I'm sorry," he said. She rubbed at her face and heaved the lever until more water poured over her. Cale went on, "I just wanted to end it for him. You were right. All this time, you were right. But I wanted to do it myself. I didn't know it would be. I'm sorry." She released the lever and pivoted to look up at him. "I saved my enemy's life today," she said flatly. She uncoiled to her feet, wiping the water from her face, and though he stood taller than her, he felt smaller as Aylin stared at him. No, not just Aylin. Queen Aylin Ash River Galathinius, he realized, was staring at him. "They tried to shoot my Rowan through the heart, and I saved her anyway." "I know," he said, her scream when the arrow had gone through Rowan. "I'm sorry," he said again. She gazed up at the stars, toward the north. Her face was so cold. "Would you truly have killed him if you had the chance?" "Yes," Cale breathed. "I was ready for that." She slowly turned to him. "We'll do it. Together. We'll free magic. Then you and I will go in there and end it together." "You're not going to insist I stay back?" "How can I deny you that last gift to him?" Aylin. Her shoulders sagged slightly. "I don't blame you. If it had been Rowan with that collar around his neck, I would have done the same thing." The words hit him in the gut as she walked away. A monster, he'd called her weeks ago. He had believed it, and allowed it to be a shield against the bitter tang of disappointment and sorrow. He was a fool. Well, at least he realizes that now. They moved Rowan before dawn, but by whatever immortal grace lingering in his veins, he'd healed enough to walk on his own, and so they slipped out of the lovely country house before any of the staff awoke. Aylin said goodbye only to Fleetfoot, who had slept curled by her side during the long night that she'd watched over Rowan. Then they were off, Aylin and Adian flanking Rowan, his arms slung over their shoulders as they hurried across the foothills. The early morning mist cloaked them as they made their way into Rifthold one last time. '67 through '79. Jeez. Let's see. No, I think we can leave it as is. Hold on. Let me see. 67 through 79. God. What the hell? I'm squinting. Don't worry. Okay, there's 67. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh, it's only 13 pages. Oh wait, no, never mind. Hold on. That was 72. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25. No, that looks fine to read for the weekday. A lot of the chapters were really short, so it looks fine. I think it should be fine for Wednesday. We can leave it for that. For then. Yeah, that was a lot that happened. It was really scary. It was really scary. It didn't go the way I thought it was. I knew they were going to run into trouble, but I honestly didn't think they were going to have any encounter with the witches, which now I guess I'm kind of glad that they did, because Manon sort of owes her life. I got up to 66. I'm not on 66, right? I'm on 60. Got up to 66 and then joined this live. Now I'm scared. Well, we just finished. We're on 62. Whoop! Yeah, everyone is safe, which I'm thankful for. And no one was, no one died. I thought someone was gonna fall into the river for sure. I didn't think they were gonna die, but I thought at least one person was going to fall into the river, and then we were going to meet up with them later, and it was going to be like revealed that they never actually died, that they were just, they just went for a little swim. Anyway, but yeah, my boy Dorian, he is going through it, but now at least I know that a life for her life. I feel like that's gonna have something to do with a lead, because I hope Manon tells a lead. Manon at least gets to tell a lead that Aelin is alive, because I mean it would be kind of like a waste if she didn't. But anyway, I forgot what I was gonna say actually. But I am interested in how that, like, a life for a life plays out. How she repays her debt. I want her and Aelin to become best friends, and I want them to fight together. Like, I want the witches to fight with Aelin somehow. I want them to switch sides. It's not even a want, it's like a need. Like, I need that I need Aelin and Manon to be best fucking friends. I need them to be best friends. It's like not even an option. Not even an option at this point. I wanted them to fall off the bridge together so they would have forced proximity and they were to be forced to be best friends. I want them to be best friends. And then could you imagine, like, Aelin naming Manon like fucking wing leader of her cavalry? Like, that would be so cool. That would be so cool. I want Manon to end up with a girl. I don't want Manon to end up with a man. I can't picture her ending up with a man. There is no man out there that deserves Manon. Like, Manon ending up with a man does not make sense to me. It does not. So if her and Dorian actually do end up together, like, it'll be fine. Like, it'll be cool, but like, she should have ended up with a woman. She should have ended up with a woman. She should end up with a woman. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Also, I am fully picturing Manon as like a slightly altered version, a slightly more intense version of Daenerys. Because I feel like that's what SJM was going for, like a Daenerys type of vibe, but like more fierce. Manon in the lead, that would be so cute. They're not related, right? No, they're not related. Okay. But that would be so cute. That would be so cute. Because Manon is all like fists and blood and... Are they related? And then Alita, she's just so sweet. It's the grumpy sunshine trope. And I'm here for it. Now I'm like paranoid that the characters I ship together are going to be related. Man. That would be cute though. That would be cute. Manon? Nun? Manon? I don't hear the difference. Manon? That's how I say nun. Non? Manon? Genuinely, it might be my accent. I do not hear the difference. I know. Manon and Lysandra. Because nun to me is none. Laughing in tub. I don't hear the difference. Lysandra was already sick of men anyway. That is true. Stop. Because now I'm like picturing Manon with every single woman that has been introduced to us. Obviously, I know she's not going to end up with Aelin. That would be an amazing duo. But, non? That's not how I say none, though. I thought... Whatever. Yeah, they would be so powerful together. I will accept her relationship with Dorian if it comes down to that, because my baby needs someone to protect him. But I would prefer it if she ended up with a woman. Manon and Lysandra would be such a good couple. They really would. But I want Lysandra to end up with Aedion. I'm sorry. I want her to end up with Aedion. I feel like her and Aedion would be so cute. They would be so cute. Manon and the healer from the Assassin's Blade. Does she ever make a comeback in the books, like, at all? I feel like she should. Or is it just like kind of like a forgotten storyline? But no, because then why would it be in... I feel like she comes back. I feel like she's gonna come back. What was I gonna say? No, Lysandra and Aedion. I really think they would be so cute together. I think their personalities go along very well. And I personally would love them together. I would. I really, really would. I would. The healer from the Assassin's Blade. The one that Aelin met. Oh God. What was she doing there? She met her at some bar, I think. And she saved her from like these 5 guys that were gonna like mug her. And she killed them. And then she asked her what she was doing there. And the healer was like, oh, like I'm stuck here. And then Aelin gave her like money to get out. I forgot the story to that. I don't remember exactly what... I don't remember her name. I don't remember her name either. But I know if I see it, I'll remember it. Oh, she was on her way to the desert. Irene. Yes, it was Irene. It was Irene. You're right. Yes. I honestly need to go back and reread The Assassin's Blade because I enjoyed it and I was like paying attention to it, but I feel like there's so many things that like I either like read too fast or like I just like didn't appreciate enough when I read them. Like all her little moments with Sam, I feel like I need to go back and reread them. No. Immediately. No. I want to! I really want to. Yeah, I don't have to read like the last part, the end of it. I don't have to read the end. I can stop right after we have all the time in the world. And then boom, they had all the time in the world. I actually genuinely, I really do want to go reread it again just so I can tab it and like annotate it. I really want to annotate it and just write in my little thoughts. I bought some new tabs and I bought those fancy highlighters, the mild liners. I finally caved and I bought them and I haven't used them yet, and it would be a good excuse to use them. You know, it would be a good excuse. I can stop whenever I want. Ugh. Yeah, I can stop right after we have all the time in the world and leave it at that. And then I'll close the book and I'll put it in my shelf and I'll leave them there in their little bubble, having, you know, with all the time in the world. All the time in the world! I'm never gonna forget that one. I'm never gonna forgive SJM. Woo! Never. That. Damn. Y'all, we're like in the final. No, we're not in the final 100 pages. What page are we on? 490? And there's how many? Yeah, we're not in the final 100 pages. We're in the final like 200 pages. But not in the final 100. But I feel like this shit is coming to a fucking head. And then you have to zoom back to present day and have your heart broken again. Yep. You're gonna need your highlighters and tabs for Crescent City. I'm reading that to y'all live, right? After I finish Throne of Glass. Yes, that's what we decided. Yeah, I do want to start annotating some of these books. Especially, I honestly, this series, y'all did not lie. I really thought y'all were lying when you told me, when everyone kept saying, oh, this is one of my favorite series. Like, this series is so good. Da-da-da-da-da. Because I had read A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I was like, it can't be that good if, you know, she also released A Court of Thorns and Roses. Which, no hate to that series. But it was, like, compared to Throne of Glass, like, that series is it doesn't come up to par. And so, y'all were not kidding about this fucking series. This series is, like, easily one of my favorites that I've read. It's painful. It's not realistic, but like it's like you never know who's safe and who's not. Yeah, like I'm glad I read A Court of Thorns and Roses first, and I came into this series expecting it to be like A Court of Thorns and Roses, because the surprise and like the shock factor that I got, yeah. A Court of Thorns and Roses is heavy on romance, and Throne of Glass plot is better. That is true. The plot is more thought out and more just like it's just better. So 2023 or 2024 maybe. The work building / plot in Throne of Glass will never be taught for me. No, yeah. It's just so good. And then the characters, the detail that she puts into them, and like the thought that she puts into her characters in this is so much better. So much better. I don't feel like anything is out of character for them. And like, even if they do something that's like out of character that they normally wouldn't do, it doesn't overshadow like what the characters have like done in the past. Like, it's not like a Daenerys where it's just like something out of left field that she would have never done. Like, it's like carefully thought out and goes towards the plot of things. Yeah. Is A Court of Thorns and Roses worth reading? Because I read Throne of Glass first. I mean, it's still a decent series. Like, it's not like horrible, but if you're comparing the two, then it's not as like, it's just more fluffy romance and like things like that. But it still has its moments where it's just like, where it's a good series still, but this one is better. Yeah, exactly. That A Court of Thorns and Roses lost one or the other. Yeah. Yep. And that's why I have no qualms with the way A Court of Thorns and Roses is written now, because it's the apology series for this one. Yeah. So yeah. Not my big sad. I go back to my big sad tab. I'm so glad I tabbed this. I go back to my big sad tab, and I just reread it. I'm not gonna read it right now because I'm gonna start crying. But anyway, all right, I'm gonna go swim now. Thank y'all for watching. I will see y'all tomorrow, and we will read some more chapters and